it's important to discuss engines and stuff. I think it's also equally important to discuss like more towards the bike, like brakes, for instance, and
Mm.
the bike choice and all that. So, um, should we start with engines?
Yeah, you go ahead. You got her.
All right, so I've already started recording. This is episode 2 of the Motorized Bike Podcast. I guess we're starting to discuss more the nitty gritty in this episode, such as engines, and we might be getting into bicycle, like the bike itself and everything. Um, Now, for the viewer, there's two types of engines that you should look out for: two strokes and four strokes. So, in my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keegan, but a two stroke is more high end power, less torque,
Yeah.
more speed, if that makes sense. So, whereas four stroke is more bottom end rather than top end, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Compared to the two stroke. If you have a 50cc four stroke and a 50cc two stroke,
The two stroke's gonna win.
the two stroke's gonna be faster, but it's gonna take longer to get to that speed. Whereas a four stroke is gonna get to the top speed faster, but it's not gonna
Faster.
be as fast.
Well, and you see that with videos like proof and point. Like you'll see like 25 miles an hour out of it depends on the transmission, but a 49cc four stroke, you'll see it get there like ridiculously quick. And you'll see the two stroke just kind of chug along to 30 miles an hour. Like it's not that big of a difference, but if you going up hills and stuff, I mean, four stroke might be the better choice.
Absolutely. The other thing, viewer, so that was primarily stock engines. Of course, with four strokes, you can modify them to some extent without changing their displacement. And the same thing with two strokes. I would say that you can modify a two stroke to a higher extent without messing with their displacement. What do you think, Keegan?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate because like a two stroke, my experience, I like to work with, I guess for the viewer, I wouldn't say like stock bore sizes, but like just a 66 to 70cc platform. You can obviously go big bore and stuff, but like I like getting power out of something that's a little bit smaller in displacement because you feel like you're doing more.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to like, this is very advanced, by the way, like doing, port timing modifications, adjusting the header of the pipe, doing all that stuff, get the most and squeeze the most power out of a two stroke. But when it comes to four stroke, it's like, you can upgrade the carb, you can upgrade the pipe for more flow, but it's like, unless you do some kind of like stroke or crank where you go up in the bore size and maybe some gearing stuff, you're really not going to see any more power advantages. This is another thing a lot of people look over because I'm into like car engines too, older V8s, and you'll see the biggest thing that people do is they'll modify the head. So two-piece style head, what you can do is you can shave it down for more compression. You can put in bigger valves, which honestly for like motorized bike stuff, unless you got a 212, it's not going to be available. But when it comes to car engines, like I said, small blocks and stuff, yeah, you can put in bigger valves. You can shave the head down for more compression. You can port it for more flow. But honestly, yeah, two stroke, you can definitely tune and modify a lot more.
Yeah, easily.
And it's just a proven fact.
It's easier to do it with a two stroke versus a four stroke, in my opinion.
Yeah, a four stroke, you basically need a machine shop, like for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing, even with doing my 212 bike, and I've owned like 49cc four stroke engines and stuff. I'm actually working on one now, but just to like modify those and whatnot, a simple modification, the most effective for a four stroke is probably going to be exhaust pipe and carburetor, among other things. And even the most effective mod on one of those really doesn't affect much. However, with a two stroke, just a simple bolt-on exhaust will
gains your horsepower.
Will give you so much more out of your engine. So if you're looking for a bike, an engine that you can modify and would be best for modifications, I'm talking to you, viewer, the two-stroke is definitely the way to go. And you can squeeze out a lot more power out of one of those compared to a four-stroke. So now let's more discuss towards the kits themselves. And for the viewer, you can piece together a kit, but for just a beginner, it's best to buy an all-in-one kit, which includes pretty much everything that you need to adapt an engine to just a simple beach cruiser or Walmart bike. And with those, pretty much everything is primarily the same or very similar, except for the engine itself. So there's anywhere from 49cc two-strokes all the way up to, I think the biggest displacement is an 85cc. There's a few of those.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but of course, out of those ranges, you can buy higher performance engines that have higher displacement, all that stuff, but they won't have the entire kit included with them. It'll just be the engine itself, and they'll be pretty expensive after that point.
Yeah, I think at that point, you don't even buy the kit, right?
Yeah.
Like people go out and source their own parts for those type of builds, like the higher end Piaggios, the ABS 10s, different kinds of like water cooled top ends, AM6s, Minarelli horizontals. That's a bunch of gibberish for the new guy, but basically it's just really expensive race motors.
Yeah.
Basically.
And for a new builder, I would not recommend buying anything that doesn't come in a kit form.
Absolutely.
Until you like gain more knowledge, you know the in and outs of these engines, and you have a decent bike platform to put it on. Because I've seen, I'm guessing Keegan has as well, where these people buy crazy powerful engines and they slap it on a $100 bike that they bought from a department store, and it completely destroys the bike and puts the rider in harm. So for the new person, I would stay clear of anything that doesn't come in a kit form, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like know your limitations. So like if you're looking at the bike that you're putting on, you're like, this could probably tear the wheel off, then don't buy that engine.
Yeah. And we'll get back into engines later, but speaking on limitations, you should look at the bike you're putting an engine on before you even consider an engine, if that makes sense. So if you look at your bike and you think that you might in the future put an engine on there, I would highly recommend you look at the integrity of the wheels, the integrity of the frame, the style of the frame, and especially the brakes and all that stuff. If those aren't up to code, most likely putting an engine on that bike will not go so well.
Here's my opinion on different frames and stuff. People get the false sense of, I guess you would say, hope, where they look at these more expensive like gas bike frames, and I have one, and I can say it's a very sturdy frame, but there's lower versions of the same thing, and people might get confused and actually go buy the Zeta Screaming Demon.
Yeah.
And that's a very flimsy frame. You see, here's the thing. The properties of aluminum is like very, how should I put it? Steel is stronger. Nobody likes to admit it. Steel is stronger, but it's heavier. So that's why people use aluminum, because it's lighter. But with aluminum, you have to have more of it to equal the same amount of strength, like tensile strength as steel. So when you'll see these frames with steel-sized tubes, but it's made of aluminum, and you put an engine on it, and you see the flex, I've seen people's chains fly off because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really don't know how to explain, how to describe those frames that have that issues, but you can look, they have much a much girthier gas tank.
Gas tank, yeah.
And some of them even have the front engine mount that's built into the frame. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, they also have a smaller rear triangle of the frame, which, as Keegan said here, it's designed for a steel material of the frame, but it's aluminum, so there's so much more flex and all that stuff, and it's just not going to be as sturdy of a frame. And of course, they can result in snapping, which
Yeah.
is not
And
what you want.
here's the thing too, if you can come across an old steel mountain bike, they make great throw together bikes. Saying is you can get away with, just re-greasing the wheel bearings, going through the bike, making sure everything's perfect on it, and you can put a relatively strong motor on one of those old bikes, and it's going to hold up fine. Because I'm speaking from experience. These
Yeah.
older like steel, like they're called a Nakamura. They're basically like you guys down there would have Dick's Sporting Goods. Up here it's called Sports Check. Same thing basically.
Yeah.
It's just a higher end. It's not a Walmart steel frame. Don't get that confused.
Yeah.
You want to find an old name brand Trek, a Giant, something like of that nature that's really well built, but it's made of steel. And you can, as long as you get around limitations of some of the frame sizing, obviously don't get one with shocks, you can really make a nice little bike for yourself.
Yeah. And of course, it really goes to show that if you know what you're looking for, you can build a better bike than if you're just throwing money at it. So like
Exactly.
you can find some really sturdy, good bikes that make good motorized bikes for $20. I mean, I found my Gen 2 felt faker frame, which for the viewer, that's arguably one of the best frames ever for a motorized bike. They're not only strong, extremely light, just really good all-round bikes. But I found mine on Facebook Marketplace for $80.
That's crazy.
They retail for about $200, but
Just for the frame, not for the bike.
just for the frame. So that just goes to show, viewer, that if you know what you're looking for, there's people around that don't know what they're looking for, and they just give stuff away. So
Pretty much.
So of course, if you find one of these steel frame bikes that will work, you can find them for $20 or $5 at yard sales. We'll give a list of stuff to look for and everything on bikes in the description of this video. That really goes over what you should look for in a bike.
Like frame choice, I don't want to exclude cruisers. Like cruisers make great builds. Here's the thing: mountain bikes are super strong, are proven. But if you want something that's really comfortable and you can get away with, like, you can get a nice seat, a nice set of handlebars, and put it on a cruiser, and that thing, you could ride it for hours. Like, I'm talking hours straight. Obviously, you don't want to do that with a two-stroke because it'll overheat. But like, you feel so much more comfortable. Like when I get on my Hypers, they're basically like a Huffy Cranbrook.
Yeah.
And they're just so comfortable. Like I can just sit there in traffic and just be like, wow, like nothing hurts. Like usually I'm on the mountain bikes, I'm like, okay, I'm a little cramped up.
Yeah.
But when I'm on those, it's just such a nice, relaxed riding position.
Absolutely. So pretty much for the viewer, there's primarily three types of frames: a road bike, a mountain bike, and a cruiser bike. And pretty much the distinctions between all three is that a cruiser bike is more comfortable. It might be heavier than the other two, but it's more comfortable and more of a commuter bike. However, a mountain bike, it's more something that you could take on the trails.
More aggressive.
Yeah. And then a road bike, which we haven't discussed, but it's primarily usually tall bikes. Some people like them. They make good motorized bikes, in my opinion.
No, I hear you because like you're probably like, thinking of a controversy because I have one. No, I can see where you're coming from because the wheels, it's a big thing. Like I said, I have a case reed like Minarelli on mine, and it's sketchy. But you know what? Since it's a Giant, I can have some faith into it, opposed to a $100 frame from Walmart.
Absolutely.
In the comments, and they'll type, "You shouldn't be using those wheels." And it's like, here's the thing though, they didn't see me off camera tightening every spoke, truing the wheels, greasing the bearings. So like I went out of my way to make sure it worked. There's mag wheels, which we'll get into that. There's mag wheels you could put on there that would probably be stronger in the short term, and I say in the short term because as we all know, mag rims do not have the greatest reputation of being reliable.
Absolutely. And just for the viewer, again, just a note, no matter what bike you're using, no matter if you buy a complete bike that's quote unquote ready to go out of the box, never overlook anything. Always look into it. Always give a quality check over on everything. You will most likely need to rebuild stuff. If that be wheel bearings, if that be rebuilding wheels. I've needed to rebuild wheels that are brand new. If that be tightening spokes or completely taking spokes out and replacing them. This hobby is notorious for being pretty harsh on those that don't know what they're doing.
That is very true. And here's the thing. I was a beginner once too. And I remember getting these nasty comments like on Facebook and stuff, and people were just chewing me out. And now that I'm more experienced, guess what? I'm still not going to do that because I've seen where some people have came from. And it's like, you know, I'll give them my, I guess you would say, opinion of what to do. But I'm not going to, like, you know, make them want to quit the hobby because that's not the end goal here. You know, the end goal is to get more experience. The end goal is to get them to like it more, etc. If you see a guy on, you know, Facebook and he's like, my engine won't start, you know, the next question I'll ask him is, okay, does it have spark? Does it have fuel?
Yeah.
Things like that. A lot of people will be like, we need more information, and just leave that blunt statement. And it's like, well, you gotta, you know, ask him some different stuff because he might not be as mechanically inclined as some of us are, and a lot of people aren't. And it's just the reality of these motorized bikes. Not everybody's going to be a two-stroke engine builder. They want to get to work. They only have so much money, etc. Yeah,
and so that's also one of the main reasons why me and Keegan are doing this podcast, as well as putting stuff out on our YouTube channels, is because we want to help people. We think it's interesting. We want to help other people that think it's interesting, and we just want to share good vibes and help people.
Exactly.
We've discussed frames. We've discussed wheels for the most part. Brakes is another big thing on your bike. Before you put on an engine or even buy an engine, make sure your bike has proper brakes.
Yep.
And a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it, I'm more than guilty of it, is buying bikes that just have coaster brakes and slapping an engine on it. And for the most part, it completely depends on your riding style, where you're riding. Sometimes you can get away with barely any brakes, but
to be safe, to like cover all grounds,
yes,
run some pretty good brakes.
Absolutely. The more braking power, the better.
Make sure you can stop before you can go.
Absolutely. And just a rule of thumb, there is no overkill when it comes to brakes.
I don't know about that one.
More or less.
I don't know. I see people snap stuff.
To some extent, there is, but for the most part, it is always better to not skip out on brakes. That's the one thing you need. So now that we've more or less discussed everything about the bike itself, should we get into engines?
Sure.
Okay. As we discussed previously a bit, there's a ton of engines out there. However, there's a lot of misinformation and confusion about which engine should you do. Like, is there ones that you should stay away from? Is there ones that are undeniably amazing. Yes, there are definitely engines that you should stay away from at all costs. And we're talking about names here. If you really don't know the names of certain engines, I'll put a link in the description of a list of engines, what they look like, and what the names are that have been deemed by enthusiasts like myself. There's an engine called the Super PK80. It's a 49 millimeter piston with an iron sleeved cylinder.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's
the one that's got that funky looking head, doesn't it? It's like
um
that it's cast iron, but it's like,
yeah.
or not cast iron. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a CNC head, but it wants to be.
Yeah. And there's some iterations of it that are like CNC.
Yeah, don't
almost.
buy that. For a beginner.
The Super PK80 is also advertised as a 100cc engine. It is not. And also, I would stay away from the iron bored cylinders. They have been proven to be good engines, but they need redesigned. Just like with most other engines, they need drastic amounts of work.
A lot of them are banged up.
A lot of them come with the sleeves because they have a steel sleeve that's inserted in the low-quality Chinese factories. A lot of the sleeves are either twisted or broken inside the cylinders, which is not good. But they're also just pretty low quality. However, even if you do get them working good, as you've seen with, I believe L.A. Hover and Build Break Fix did the iron bore builds. Is that correct?
I mean, I got one too. It's an okay cylinder.
It's an okay platform viewer, but really, it's not a lot. It's not a powerhouse, if that makes sense.
I think the way I look at it is like, if you want to do that big bore swap in the future, buy yourself the 66/80cc engine. Make sure you understand the inner workings of it. Do some research on how to take it apart. There's plenty of videos on it. Then go ahead and buy yourself the big bore kit. Learn a little about porting, and then do it. Don't go and buy it out the gate because they have casting imperfections. Same as the 110 in the intake port, the transfers, exhaust, etc. It's not a well-made, like Noah said, it's not a well-made cylinder out of the gate. So you put that on your bike, not only is it not well-made, but the one that I actually bought, which was from the factory, it's a weird combo. It was a 47 millimeter iron sleeve. It literally had, I could take my finger and put it on the top of the piston, brand new, and I could take metal off of it. So if you were the person that was just to put that on a bike and run it, you would have major issues.
Absolutely. One thing that really we've kind of discussed, two engines that you should avoid. What engines should you not avoid? Which engines should you downright buy? Like, which ones are bulletproof?
Okay. So this is a hard question to answer because there's so many different variations of the same thing.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think. So if you're a beginner watching this video, I would say there's no real names to these engines. There's slang words like a G4 motor.
Yeah.
But to put it in perspective, the 66S 80cc motors that you'll find online, which most of the time they're going to be called 80cc's, look for the two-piece jugs. Stay away from the one-piece.
The one piece is real!
They're kind of hard to do modifications to later on. Yeah, go with the G4 style motors. You'll be able to indicate that motor by looking at the side of the cylinder, and you'll see there's like 4 or 6 little dots. It's hard to see, but you'll look at it.
Yeah.
And that's a really good starting point because you get clean ports. You usually get a clean engine out of the box with a pretty good, respectable performance figure. It's not going to be great, but it's not going to be like 50cc.
Yeah.
So that's my first recommendation. The second recommendation, when it comes to two-strokes, if you have previous mechanical knowledge, let's say you're in a trade, and you already have a garage, and your garage is full of tools, and you're well experienced with other types of machinery, I would look at the Bullet Train, the BT80 electric start, because that is a really practical, believe it or not, motor with the electric start. Try not to use the pole start because those tend to break, and it has a battery. It has triple clutch, so you don't have to worry about using the manual lever.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing as far as common sense mechanical abilities, I think a BT80 is a cool option. So, and that's from Bike Berry, so you have to do your research on it.
Yeah.
Maybe there is another place to buy it, I'm not sure. But as far as engines goes, I've been looking at different websites and stuff. If you want power out of the gate, I think they're finally figuring it out. The Phantom 85 might be an okay option, but the Avenger 85, if you do a bit of research on it, it's basically an improved Phantom, but it's like a China doll reference, basically just the Chinese style of engine. That's a good motor. Like, I honestly think when that hits the market, that's going to put a lot of the higher end engines to shame, because it comes with a 52 piston, like millimeter piston. It has Minarelli style transfers. It has correct squish out of the box, which is like unheard of. It has a lot better exhaust system, and it's got room to upgrade, believe it or not. So it's like, it makes you wonder, why should I go build a Minarelli? I mean, I have a Minarelli and I love it.
Yeah.
But it's like, for the out of the box performance, I think the Avenger's really good. The YD100, that gets me going, because everybody praises the YD, but it's just like the 110 in my experience. You have to really do a lot of modifications to it to make it worthwhile even using.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I retired mine. For the viewer, for a while, 2 years or something crazy, I was on a crazy adventure of building a YD100, which is pretty much a single-piece cylinder with a 50 millimeter piston. Really nothing special, but at the time it was the largest displacement engine available to slap on a bike, and I tried tuning it to its utmost potential, and I don't know, I kind of hit a wall.
No, like things that you do on your standard engine on the YD, I don't know why, but it just never worked out for me. I think honestly the big thing is that single piece jug. People like to ignore the fact, guys, if your motor doesn't cool properly, it's not going to perform to its greatest potential. If that thing's run at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not going to be as efficient. It's overheating itself. Like, I've done the bounce crank to it. I've put the bigger carb on it. I had the CDH67. This wasn't when it was all modified. This one I had everything just bolted onto it. And I'm not going to lie, it wasn't that fast. Like, it literally had no power band. And I ported it. Like, I raised the transfers. I raised the exhaust. It had decent blowdown. And it still didn't work that good.
Yeah, and a lot of these engines, for the viewer, a lot of these engines have limitations to them. So that's why, like, the 4040, which is the G4 engine that Keegan discussed previously, as well as the Avenger 85, that's why those are such good engines, because they don't have as many limitations compared to a lot of the other engines. They're not only reliable, but they have so much more potential than other engines. So that's one of the reasons why we recommend them. And just again, I will put a link to a post I made a while back about the different names that these engines are called, rather if that be deemed by enthusiasts like myself and Keegan, such as the 4040, Super Peaky 80, that those engines aren't necessarily advertised as, but they've just garnered those names.
I can't believe I forgot the 4040. I literally used to say that all the time.
Yeah.
Like the 4040, just because the Zeta 4040 was like the engine of choice, and then Zeta went out of business, like Zeta Mafia.
Yeah.
And I think everybody just started calling it different cylinder names and stuff. So Yeah, the names vary, but if you can understand the lingo, it makes it a lot easier when people are discussing stuff on Facebook. So you don't say what, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
And just again for the viewer, as I said previously, talking about bikes, if you know what you are looking for in an engine, it good for you. Like that's the best you can do. It's important to learn what's good and what's bad. So like a lot of these sites like Bikeberry, bicycleengines.com, they just sell and like rebranded engines for double the price that you can get them on
I
eBay or
know.
whatever.
And that's the sad truth. Like literally when I got the reed valve from 'em, it says CDH power on it. Like it literally says the name onto it.
Yeah.
And same goes for their side covers. Like I said, I'm not knocking them in any shape or way or form.
Yeah. You, the viewer, if you find a good engine, so like the 4040 that we're talking about, it's advertised on pretty much every motorized bike website. If that be the Wildcat PK80, the ZMN 40 that's on CDH Power's website, the I don't know, the Firestorm 80, all those. Those are the exact same engines. And one thing that you have to understand is all of these engines come from China. That's why they're called the China doll. So, the same engine that's advertised on bicycleengines.com, the Firestorm 80, which they charge about $200 for, you can buy the literal same thing on eBay for $95. That's why I say if you know what you're looking for, that's a huge win because you can I wouldn't call it scamming. I wouldn't call that a scam what
No,
bicycleengines.com is doing. And they're providing a service and everything. And of course eBay is a bit more risky
it is. It really is.
in terms of buying engines and stuff, but if you know what you're looking for, you can save
Yeah.
serious money.
I think when it comes to Bikeberry stuff, I think their upgraded kits, even for the price, when you price it out, they're really still not worth it. But like, they have the copper head gasket, they have the upgraded quote unquote magneto, they have the CNC head. But you can buy all that stuff aftermarket. And I don't
Yeah.
think people realize that. Like, they'll be like, oh, I got the stage 4. And it's like, I got to thinking, I have a Zeta 4040 with the CNC head and HP carb. Let's just say I did. In
Yeah.
theory, I could print off a BBR tuning sticker and call it a stage 4.
Yeah.
So it makes you really think, like, what makes it a stage 4?
Yeah, and what's the viewer, one other thing that we forgot to mention in the first episode, in terms of why we build motorized bikes, is because they are so darn easy to modify and upgrade. I think we skipped on it, but
I think we touched on it a little bit. Like I said, it was easy to do stuff.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's just so darn easy. Not only is it easy, but cheap, but parts are so darn cheap and they're really readily available. At least in the States. So like an exhaust, now I have a video guide of exhausts that you want
Go
as
check
well
it
as
out.
yeah, as well as exhausts that you definitely want to stay away from. But pretty much an exhaust that's pretty good can be had readily available to your door in 2 days for $40. Whereas what an exhaust for a dirt bike is what $250?
Oh, more than that.
Like
More
more
than
than that. So like and an exhaust hugely increases performance in a motorized
It really
bike.
does.
So I mean that just goes, and that's one of the biggest expenses in a motorized bike.
Well, a good expansion chamber, and we come back to this. It's like you see all these boost bottles and intakes, and people think I can get away with just putting that on, not buying a real pipe.
Yeah.
And I went through this. I've been guilty of it, and I
Yeah.
think the little power adders, there's nothing wrong with it. But it's like if you don't have good port work and you don't have a good pipe to go with it, you can put a G2 reed on. You can window the piston. You can do all this stuff, and it's really not going to make big of a difference. But if you put the pipe with it, you'd be surprised the gains you'll get.
Yeah. So an exhaust is the most effective bolt-on modification.
Oh, no doubt.
Like you pretty much for your engine and pretty much for any two-stroke engine, if you get a correct exhaust and you just bolt it on, you really don't need to do anything besides most likely tune your carburetor for the expansion chamber, but you'll gain easily a horsepower depending on the pipe in the engine. But that's huge because an engine in a stock form only produces 2 horsepower, 2.5 horsepower. If that. So, I mean, you're gaining, 50% in just a $40 bolt-on mod. And we'll probably cut this episode shortly. But I just want to touch on this again. Performance mods, it's more limited on your expertise as well as the engine to some degree. However, it's really your expertise. And I just want to say, if you don't have the experience and you really don't know what you're doing, learn like before you go screwing something up. Because most likely, if you go trying tinkering with stuff and you think you know what you're doing, double check, because I've seen a few people that really regret, and I am more than guilty of doing this, where I think I'm doing something that'll help my engine, and I either did not fact check my ideas, or I got the wrong source or whatever. But definitely make sure that you're doing something beneficial to your engine and you know exactly what you're doing before you go doing something. If that be buying a new exhaust pipe, buying a boost bottle, buying a carburetor that would possibly be too big. I mean...
Yeah. People religiously defend the boost bottle, and it cracks me up because it's like, okay, so you're telling me increasing intake volume for no reason through a small tube is really going to make all that power.
But because Yamaha did it 50 years ago.
And they can go screw themselves.
Yeah, it's super funny. I got a lot of criticism when I uploaded my boost bottle video explaining why it doesn't do much, and everybody's like, oh, then why did Yamaha do it 50 years ago? I'm like, okay, maybe they did it 50 years ago, but explain why they don't do it now.
No, that's like saying freaking Harley Davidson, they board track raced 100 years ago on a 50-degree wall. Why are people not doing that now? What a bunch of wusses. Like, bro, nobody does that because it's dangerous and they have no brakes.
Yeah. It's like a boot. Well, it's the same thing. I think the people that defend the boost bottles are in the same boat with the people that think that like the longer offset intakes increase performance.
Oh my, bro!
It literally only makes a larger intake volume, which makes your engine run leaner, and that would potentially increase performance if you were running in rich settings already. Like,
yeah. Here's the thing. I saw a comment, and Buddy goes, I have an 80cc with a chainsaw spark plug, and I do 60 miles an hour on a 44.2 sprocket. So I thought, okay, this makes no sense. So I went in the smoke speed calculator, and he would have to be revving at like 17,000 RPM.
Yes.
I'm like, oh yeah, because bro's got a freaking 50cc race bike. Like,
absolutely. We've all seen those.
I hit $17,000 all the time, bro. It's so fun. When a piston goes up through my head, no, it's a little far.
Absolutely. And for the viewer, Keegan just now mentioned the Smolik Performance Speed Calculator, and I've used this tool quite a bit, but you go onto smolikperformance.com and you go to resources, I believe, and he has a speed calculator. So if you type in your speed, your RPMs of the engine, you type in all your gearing information, the size of the tire, all that stuff, it'll give you a speed. So if you have a bike that goes 50 miles per hour, you can find out how fast your engine is revving, all that stuff. So I use it to fact check myself as well as other people sometimes. But
You be getting them Facebook posts with the 44 sprocket with a bone stock pipe, and you get 45 miles an hour.
yes. So, and just another reminder, viewer, most of the engines that come in the kits, they're usually not capable of achieving speeds of more than 45 miles per hour, with the exception of the Avenger 85 and the Phantom 85.
The Phantom.
Yep.
I think before we go, does anybody that's watching, should we talk about the Minarelli or no? Should we leave that? Not the one that you build, but the ones that you buy.
Oh, yeah, we should. Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Because those.
All right.
Okay, so guys, this is another engine that is kind of in the middle of stay away from, but also tempting to buy.
Exactly.
So go ahead. What is a Minarelli? Just for the viewer.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll do that first. So Minarelli, basically, people are looking to make power, so in the most bolt-on way possible. So basically, you have a Yamaha BWS, a Yamaha Jog, a Honda Elite. One of those scooters, if you do some research on them, they're pretty powerful little motors for the displacement. So basically, they have really good port timing. So what they do is they have the cylinder body itself, and they put a little spacer plate. Depending on your con rod length, which could be a 40 millimeter stroke, could be a 38, they have a little spacer plate that makes it adapt to a motorized bike, and the ports are matched as good as they can be. And it has to run your own exhaust system because the exhaust port is different. It's a little bit wider for the bolt spacing. The intakes on the verticals are different because they have a built-in reed valve, which is pretty cool. Like, it's a cool feature. But the only downside to that is you're going to have to spend the money and get a proper carbon pipe, or you're not going to take advantage of it. So basically, to answer the question, what is a Minarelli? It's a hybrid, which basically means it's two of one, I guess you would say. It's like a mix of two things.
Yeah.
It's a motorized bike bottom end with a Italian scooter top end.
Yeah. And this engine is called a Minarelli, and it's pretty much just like a beefed up motorized bike engine that creates much more power than a China doll engine. And while it does create a lot of power, the major downside is pricing. And so we've seen, and me and Keegan have both just recently been dabbling in the Minarellis and all that stuff, and it is expensive. However,
it is.
It's
put a lot of money into it.
Very expensive. However, sources now, sellers, just like California Motorbikes, are starting to sell cheaper alternatives, if that be pre-built Minarelli engines, or like shipping you an entire kit that you just bolt on yourself to create a Minarelli engine for the most part, a fraction of the price that it would cost for you to either piece it together yourself or buy it pre-built from Smolik Performance, for instance.
They have a lot of issues, though, and I'm not afraid to talk about them. So to put it into simple terms, the Minarelli cylinder, opposed to a Chandon motor, is fully cast iron, right?
Yes.
Think of your older car engine. It's a fully cast iron block. And some of the newer ones are aluminum, and they cool better, et cetera. You guys know that. But basically, the bore tolerances, there's literally, it's been known in the scooter world, because I do follow the scooter pages. It's literally known for these cylinders to have tight bore clearances, which basically means if you don't have the correct tune or you don't hone out the cylinder previously before running it, it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to seize it. And I know it sounds ridiculous. Wow, he spent all this money and it seizes. But if you know the people that can help you, obviously, with getting it set up correctly, you can have great results. Knock on wood, with my style of riding and the cylinder head I have on it. I mean, I went for a 45-minute ride straight, never got into the even 300s. I think it stayed under that. And it just really surprised me. Like I said, everybody's telling me, oh, it's going to seize. But we're not going to get into bore clearances because that's pretty advanced. But all I'm trying to say is buyer beware. If you're going to buy the California Motorbikes Minarelli, buy yourself a flex hone to go along with it, and pretty much do your own research on the bore clearances. To give you guys a point of reference, mine was, I think it was 0.18 thousandths of an inch, and I put it up to 0.22, and I've had great results. So that's a little bit of a baseline for y'all. But yeah, so basically they have seizing problems because the cooling, right?
Yeah.
On a scooter, you have a cooling fan on a shroud, and that forces air onto the jug. That's a term for a cylinder. And they can get away with running the smaller heads because of that. On a motorized bike that's passively cooled, you actually have to run a bigger billet CNC head to be safe. Obviously, there's people that don't do it, but they're super experienced with tuning. Run yourself a good cylinder head. Hone it out previously. Don't do the whole drilling holes in the piston. That's just going to weaken it in my experience.
Yeah.
So stay away from that. And yeah, just make sure you hone it out previously and run a safe tune. I mean, people can complain in the video that your bike's four-stroking, but the last thing you want to see is a post coming up later on Reddit, Facebook, wherever it is, that it sees. So start out rich and break it in properly, and then you can fine-tune it from there. But obviously, you don't want to get on the throttle immediately because that's a lot of power.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could, when it comes to a Minarelli, it's a totally different power curve than even a saw build. It comes on very aggressively and at high speeds. A saw's got torque down low.
Yeah.
So if something happens catastrophically to the bike, you can kind of deal with it better. But if you're going 50 miles an hour, you know, and the bike's flying down the road.
And then you just hit a wall of power.
They just hit a wall of power. And let's say your chain tensioner, if you're running one, falls to the spokes, or a mag wheel cracks if you're running mags, which I don't know why. But let's say you were. Something really bad happens. The effect of injury is going to be like 10 times worse. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. And just the other thing that I want to mention with the pre-built Minarellis especially, it's such a low tolerance engine. Even the minimal things that really wouldn't make a difference in a China doll will in a Minarelli. Because a China doll spins at about, 8,000 RPM?
Nah, probably like 6,000, like stock.
Yeah, like stock. About 6,000 RPM. With a Minarelli, it's about, 11, 12,000?
Yep. I've had mine up to like 11, and I don't want to go any further.
Yeah. So you can see if you have a small, a small defect in your cylinder, it'll make a huge difference when you're reaching those speeds in a Minarelli compared to a China doll. Just because there's so much more stress in a Minarelli engine or a Piaggio or anything like that. And we'll get into those types of engines in another episode. But pretty much if you buy one of these pre-built, you're going to need to take it back apart and rebuild it. Unless it's from a seller like Don Butler or Smolik Performance.
Yeah.
Because they
like
do...
somebody that's already went through it.
Yes.
Pretty much.
For somebody who knows what they're doing and has actually built the engine, not just pieced it together, it'll be fine. They're reputable sellers. You're good. However, somebody like California Motorbikes, who just get their stuff shipped in boxes over from China, you're going to need to do some pretty heavy work to get it to the point where it's drivable. Especially when it comes to honing and prepping the cylinder. I noticed when I bought my Wildcat Minarelli from California Motorbikes, and I'm not dissing them in any way, it's not their fault, but I did notice that there was a lot of metal dust and shavings all over my cylinder that if I had not gotten out when I first assembled my engine, it would have completely shredded it apart. So just check over your engine to make sure that there are no issues, because most likely on any engine, but especially with low tolerance engines like Minarelli's, if you don't do an initial quality check, that engine will probably not last long.
It's getting late. For me, it's 11 o'clock, but...
Oh, man. Okay, yeah, we should probably wrap this thing up. So, this is episode 2.
What are we talking about next one?
I don't know.
I'm trying to think, because we went over frames, we went over engines, we went over gear. I don't think there's really that much more. Maybe like tools and parts and stuff like that.
Yeah, we could, next episode, so for the viewer, next episode, we're probably going to talk more about like toolkits, necessary toolkits, as well as...
Yeah, I think that's definitely good.
And you also mentioned like wheels and stuff. That's something that I also like talking about. So
exactly.
Next episode...
And brakes. Did we talk about brakes a lot?
We kind of skipped over them, but yeah. So next episode, we'll dive deeper into brake stuff as well as wheels, like what makes a good wheel set, as well as like necessary...
You can brag about your disc brakes. No.
As well as necessary tools, toolkits that we take on our rides, all that stuff. Anything else?
No, that's pretty good. Sounds pretty good to me. That was
cool.
Definitely a good talk.
All right, so this has been the Motorized Bike Podcast with me, noahalger, as well as Keegan Hache, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. See ya, boys.